We are recording, just so you know, for the people that can't be here, all the teachers still stuck in their classrooms. Um, Beth, one of our speakers today, has just line biked quickly home from the classroom, so thank you so much. I think Adrian will make a start.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really lovely to host this book launch today and to welcome you all here, whether you are live, that I can see you on screen right now, or whether you're catching up on the recording. Yeah, welcome to this book launch of Sophie's book, which is called Teacher Autonomy, Where Has It Gone and Why We Need It Back. I'm honoured to be asked to host this book launch. Probably just give a bit of background about how Sophie and I know each other. Personally, Sophie and I kind of go way back in terms of our best friends. One of Sophie's best friends, Michaela, married my best friend Joe, and so we know each other that way. And I think the very first time we met might have been at Joe's flat, some fancy dress party, murder mystery party back in the day. And obviously, we connected. Like, I'm not even sure if I was a teacher back then. Uh,
I think you were just training, Adrian. I
okay,
don't
okay.
remember being very positive about it.
Right, okay. Well, you putting me off. Um, but we obviously connected back then, and then kind of professionally, I know Sophie as a teacher, but kind of I think what inspires me about Sophie is she's a teacher that isn't happy to accept the status quo for how things are as they are, but more than that, because I also think that's a lot of teachers that aren't happy with how things are and don't want to accept the status quo is that Sophie is like really prepared to do something about it. Whether that's through kind of setting up her own company, Mindfulness for Learning, whether that's through kind of blogging, interviewing people that inspire her, and then eventually kind of leading her to research and write this amazing book all about teacher autonomy. So that's kind of how Sophie and I kind of know each other. In terms of who I am, I mentioned I'm a teacher. I teach part time now, and I've been a teacher since 2010. I teach at Broughton Community Schools in Aylesbury. I also lecture at Oxford Brookes University, and I teach a specialist pathway there to trainee teachers all about health and well-being. And I also kind of set up, like Sophie, a little side hustle company called Teach Happy that basically tries to teach the science of well-being to children, teachers, and parents. Um, yeah, helping people find more pleasure and purpose in their lives inside and outside of the classroom. So that's how Sophie and I know each other. That's how we've connected, and that's why Sophie asked me to host this book launch today. Just a quick overview of what we're going to kind of be doing over the next hour. First of all, the only housekeeping bit is that this is being recorded so that people that aren't here live can catch up. Um, we would love to hear your questions. So please use the chat function. Any questions you have, drop in there. And as the host, I'll be kind of checking in on them and we might be answering them as we go or saving them towards the end. Um, we've got three brilliant speakers alongside Sophie. So we've got Yinka Ogunnusi, we've got Beth Ewin and Eliza Fricker. They're all going to be kind of sharing some of their insights and how they've contributed to this book. Um, but yeah, that's it. We're just going to get stuck in now. And I just want to start by kind of hearing from you, Sophie, uh, and really what inspired you to write this book. So, why this book? Why you? And why now?
Um, yeah, I think the infantilizing of the profession was becoming infuriating to me. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And every single day at work, and I'm not personalizing it to the school I work in now, it's just in education. I've been in education for 16 years. So it's
Yeah.
just every day there is something that happened that just kind of was added to this list that was coming together of why do we do that? And why do we treat people like that? And why do we request that? And the list got so long that and people around me probably got so sick of me just saying the same things over again that I just started to note things down.
Mm.
And then I thought, I've got to write a book. It's all got to go in one place. And it's basically, this idea that calling out all the nonsense that happens, and putting it all in one place. And on a personal level, that's been really cathartic for me. I think it has shut me up a little bit day to day. It's given me a little bit of peace that actually I've said it, I've put it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel better about it. I can digest it a bit more.
Hmm. And why do you think so? You've been in education 16 years. Why now?
Partly because it has been 16 years. And so
Yeah.
I feel, when you start teaching, it's interesting. I spoke to a lot of ECTs in my research for the book. And the one thing that came up is this sense of you've got to earn your autonomy.
Hmm.
It needs to be a certain amount of time before you're owed autonomy. And then, and I think there is that mindset now that I feel like I've done my time and I'm entitled to now say how I feel about it. So there is
Yeah.
that. Also, obviously, it's such a turbulent time in education. I'm not sure I can remember a time that it wasn't turbulent. I feel like, the one thing that's consistent in education is change. But it just feels like there is a lot of voting with feet. Children are not happy, parents are not happy, teachers are not happy, but yet it's still the same, and we're still moving with
Mm.
the same thing. So I think we need to be having these conversations, and the book is fairly bold with the things that I'm saying. I've tried not to hold back too much,
Mhm.
and because I think it's time that we do that now.
Yeah. And what what does autonomy mean to you? So you've obviously it's a massive, it's a bit like well-being, right? When
Yeah.
I deliver training on well-being, I always start by getting whoever's in the room to try and define well-being in a short, succinct way. And what happens 9 times out of 10, it turns into this massive nebulous concept because there's so many elements and dimensions to it. And I kind of feel the same a bit with autonomy. So like, how would you define autonomy based on your research and the fact that you've written a whole book about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think I started the book th feeling differently about it to when I ended, and I think there's certain
Okay.
assumptions that people make about autonomy, and I think there's a lot of fear about it because I think autonomy generates this idea that we're on our own, that it's a free for all, that you're allowed to just do what you want when you want. And I know we've spoken about this, Adrian, in the podcast episode, that
Yeah.
actually autonomy needs a lot more guidance. It needs a lot more support than we initially think. I talk a lot about professional learning and CPD in the book because actually that's the foundations of being able to utilize autonomy. We can't, if you get an ECT and they start in a classroom, you can't just put them in the classroom and say, "Oh, have all the freedom you like."
Yeah.
That would make them feel awful. That would be so overwhelming. So I think, having autonomy is having some sense of belonging in the setting that you're working in, and some sense of having space to give and be heard, but
Hmm.
also having space to listen and collaborate as well. Not things not being done to you, but just having that collaboration and feeling part of something
Hmm.
is a really important part of that.
And do you feel like you were always destined to write this book? And what I mean by that, I was rereading like your intro and where you talked about when you were younger, maybe from the age of
Yeah.
16, you started to kind of rebel in just various ways, like asserting your own independence, whether that was with kind of your mum or at school or, in the workplace. And it reminded me because obviously you're a huge kind of advocate of mindfulness. It reminded me of this book by Ellen Langer called The Mindful Body. Have you read that book?
I haven't read it, no.
There's a bit right at the beginning where she talks about rules. And she says, in life as in art, although we tend to praise rule followers, I believe that breaking the rules is often necessary. Too often we follow rules mindlessly. We buy the right brushes, wear the right clothes, ask the appropriate questions. When we approach the rules mindfully, however, we realize they are often arbitrary and don't make sense. And she says you need to use the brush. You don't need to use the brush or obey the rules on perspective. It's your painting, it's your life. Like,
I love that.
yeah, how much do you feel like you're always destined to write this book because of your natural inclination to push back against rules and
Yeah.
rebel? And how does that tie in with your kind of interest in mindfulness as well about questioning the status quo, etc.?
Yeah, I actually think, thinking back, something I've just thought about now is that the first time I recognized my need to break rules was probably when I did my first ever mindfulness course, which is really late. I think I was 34, 35.
Okay.
But really, if I'd have tuned, I think it's because I tuned in.
Mm.
I think that was always part of me. I was a child who was very compliant up until teens. To the point where my mum would lay out clothes for me in the morning and I would put them on. I remember the one time I said I didn't want to wear it and I got left at home because I wasn't listening. But most of the
Yeah.
time I did exactly what I was told until I realized that I didn't have to. And then I was
Mm.
like, oh, hang on, like this is ridiculous. I don't need to do all this, and went completely the other way. Yeah, I mean, I think it can be frustrating for some people that I do question everything, and it's definitely become something that has become more part of me more as I've got older because I
Mm.
recognize that's important to me. But yeah, in terms of when I can see damage being done, whether that be to my own well-being, whether that be to the team I work with or the children that I'm working with, then it becomes like the stakes are much higher. Like I've
Mm.
got to say something. I can't sit and not. So I think it was always there. It was just bringing it out. And the education system didn't bring it out into me until I started the Institute of Education. And they showed me a video of Ken Robinson. And then I was like,
Mm.
ah, yeah, no, I love this job because actually
Yeah.
I can speak up.
Mm. Awesome. Okay. Before we hear from our first kind of speaker, Beth, I just wanted to let people know about a competition. In fact, did you want to let them know the competition?
Yeah.
It's gone.
So if you ask any questions, we're going to pick our favourite question at the end. For two people can get signed copies of the book. It's not released until 22nd of January. So whoever we announce at the end will just be able to give their details to me and then I can send them out when they come.
Cool. So definitely ask some questions because you stand to win a prize, which is the signed copy of the book. Um, so now what we're going to do is we're going to hear from various speakers, and then once they've spoken, Sophie and I are just going to kind of reflect on what they said, maybe ask them a couple of questions, and equally, if you want to ask questions, then please join in at that point. So our first speaker is Beth Ewin, and I know Beth through some training you attended in London. I can't remember when that was, but in the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
it's really lovely to meet you there in person. Um, and Beth is a primary school teacher. I love how she describes herself as an outdoor learning guru, or maybe that's how Sophie
No, that's
describes you.
Sophie, but I appreciate that.
A mindfulness advocate, and Sophie was your, or you were Sophie's partner teacher while she was writing this book.
Yeah.
So Beth, you're going to talk to us about autonomy as an early career teacher. A sense of autonomy in the first kind of couple of years of your teaching career and kind of moving outside of your ECT years. So, Beth, over to you. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. This is much more daunting than teaching lots of 5-year-olds, so bear with me. But yeah, I just wanted to really start off by saying, Soph, done you. You've done it the Sophie way, just like head on, got stuck in with so much passion and vision. So well done. And yeah, it's so tricky, this subject. And thank you for bringing along the best people. And thank you for bringing me along too. So yeah, I will start. I'm Beth. I'm a school class teacher, Sophie's ex-partner teacher, which is very sad, but we're still in the same school. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about how my journey from this massive kind of word autonomy, and actually when did I first feel like that was kind of being taken away, or when I wanted to actually have it. So yeah, we're going to go back a few years. So let's go back. No amount of training, mentoring, or observing can really prepare you for the first day of being a class teacher. It's like nothing you try to picture. I remember wishing I had 30 ears to listen to all those 30 voices, the speediest typing skills to answer every email, or simply just 30 working whiteboard pens. You quickly realise teaching is not about the hours between 9 and 3. There's so much more that you have to juggle and manage. And you really have this ideal picture in your head that you are going to have the biggest impact, and you're going to plan and deliver such amazing and inspiring lessons. And my class are going to love coming to school. And again, oh, it's nice to think back. But yeah, having so much energy and enthusiasm, I really wanted every experience and lesson to be perfect. So I was spending spending endless hours creating and making resources, thinking that that was the answer to a good lesson and being a good teacher. But I look at the clock and it's 6 o'clock again, and I haven't written my observations, and I haven't planned any of my other lessons. Why is planning one lesson taking me a whole afternoon as my partner teacher, Angel Sophie, is whizzing through and leaving early, mostly every day? It was really hard to find the answers and a massive period of trial and error. I was constantly putting my head around Sophie's door, thinking, oh my goodness, that's not on the plan. Why are you doing that? That kind of sense of fear and dread, because when you're an ECT, you kind of need to be spoon fed. You have no experiences to draw off. And yeah, your partner teacher always makes it look so easy. So yeah, that second guessing and feeling totally out of my depth. And overall, it was a very tiring experience. So throughout my training year, you're taught to kind of reflect, and that is like the best possible tool for you to change any of your ideas. But what comes with that is that kind of inner negativity, and it takes over, and it kind of is impossible not to compare yourself to other teachers who are just making it look so easy. And the questions come, how are they juggling everything? So with the never-ending job list, I needed to take the shortcuts where I could. And that's when the bought-in schemes, with their prescriptive nature, seemed like the answers to all my problems. Yes, there's a video showing me how to teach a whole lesson. Phew. Oh, yes, I know they're going to show me how to hold the resources. Yep, that's another thing I don't need to worry about. And I'm also going to be the same as every other teacher. I remember watching the videos so closely, like memorizing every line in the videos. And in the videos, it was the ideal situation. No children were calling out, no one needed the toilet, and no one wanted to tell me it was going to be their birthday in 5 months' time. So a major relief. And this 30 minutes of my day is going to be such a treat. I truly welcome the schemes, as it saved me time and energy that I was severely lacking. And I needed a break, and thought this style of teaching would be my answer. So as a couple of months went by teaching off the scheme, my class were not quite like the class in the video. They were so bored, and so was I. Without really noticing it, I went off the script. Not allowed to do, but as you would. And my class and I found our own way of doing the parts of the next lesson. So great, I now have an engaged class and one less teacher. But sadly, all teachers dread them. The observations come, and with that, the feedback. Please watch the videos and keep to the script. We must see consistency across the early reading year groups. And it really made me think, am I only as good as a script? Where's my teacher voice? And am I not trusted to teach this lesson effectively? It began to feel so unnatural to teach in this manner, and I could feel it, and so could my class. And that was my first real memory of feeling constricted, and it felt like a disservice to the children and their school experience. This isn't working for any of us, and it made me think, is this the future and kind of the purpose of teaching? Is teaching only about delivering lessons that are pre-planned and decided solely by the big companies and the governments? So what was my training for? For schools, there is so much pressure for results and everyone to be getting a similar experience, and the answer can seem like a uniform approach will support this goal. But in reality, only a small minority of those involved are enriched by this approach. So my hopes and wishes were sadly not answered by the schemes. It bought me a tiny bit of time, but it really did create such a big disconnect from what teaching really is. And I'm glad that I listened to that discomfort. And also I had Sophie as well in my ear. Also talking about that discomfort, but it really, like, her kind of passion and kind of drive to try and challenge these ideas, it really opened up a whole new world for me. So yeah, eternally thankful and grateful. So yeah, it really made me reflect and turn me towards what I value most in teaching: that connection, the openness, and collaboration. I now know that our favourite lessons are both when my class and I find a balance between adult-led and child-led. And this journey of exploring autonomy has not only made me reflect on when I'm told the ways that I must teach, but has made me put myself in the shoes of my class. How many demands am I putting on them? How must that must make them feel? It truly is a balance, and that comes with making time to get to know my children and also to get to know me as a teacher. So, although this part of my day is sadly non-negotiable, I can now find the balance and gain back my autonomy in other ways that work for me and my class. Some days it does feel really hard with all that is asked for us, but there is hope and space to bring something of your own. And your class and yourself will truly be thankful for it. And I feel like this is so annoying, but any ECTs out there, everything gets so much easier with that bit of experience. You hear it so much, but the years go by and the easier it definitely gets. And those yeses are going to be turned into, sorry, I don't have the capacity right now. And your priorities will just change. So yeah, keep going and you'll get there in the end. But yeah, that is my journey.
Thank you, Beth. That was really great to hear kind of, yeah, your journey from right at the beginning, working with Sophie and kind of the insights you've gained along the way. Just some really powerful questions you kind of reflected on during your talk, like, am I only as good as a script and where's my teacher voice? And it's made me realize like how unique everyone's ECT experience is as well, depending on the context you're in, who your partner teacher may or may not be, who your mentor is. That massively shapes you as a teacher in those kind of early formative years. So so lucky, and glad you had someone like Sophie kind of to work closely with and to role model, challenging the status quo and focusing on the things that matter. It made me think about my first year in teaching and how, like Sophie said, it would be completely irresponsible, once you're a qualified teacher to just be like, right, off you go, teach the national curriculum and do what you think's best for the kids in front of you. No one would want that. That would be massively overwhelming. But I do remember advice that my first ever head teacher gave me very, very early on. It probably was in my first year of teaching, and I still have it in my head today. And she said, you have to make teaching work for you. And like that was such powerful permission because it was one, it kind of acknowledged that it's possible. It is possible to make this job work for you. And secondly, it was also acknowledging that unless you do this kind of job can overtake everything, unless you put boundaries in place, unless you make it work for you. And also I just love the point about balance. Like pretty much everything in life comes back to this notion of balance. So like you said, the balance between adult-led and child-led, and the balance between having to kind of follow the rules and then finding your own voice and your own way of doing things. Sophie, I don't know if you had any reflections as Beth was speaking.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was lovely to hear Beth talk on a personal level as well, because obviously I've observed her journey, and it's really lovely to hear her reflect on that time, which you can see, can't you, when you see ECTs and you're not in that phase of teaching anymore. It's so obvious to you why they're feeling so overwhelmed. But obviously, when they're in it, all sorts of things go through their head, like I'm not good at this job, or I shouldn't be doing it, or whereas that's going to pass. But yeah, balance, absolutely. I even me, who I love to break rules, that have a purpose, by the way. I'm not just reckless.
Yeah.
But even that, I know that there are boxes I've got to tick. I know that me and Tina, who I think is on the call here Tina Farr, who's the head teacher of St Ebbe's in Oxford, we have this conversation all the time that, she's a head teacher. She's got a job that she needs to do. She's got children that she has to, get to a certain point. There are realities that we have to suck up and we have to get on with. But there are areas where we can find space and connection. We don't have choice over the system. We can fight the system if we have the energy to do so. I don't expect anyone to do that on top of the job. It's a choice that you have to make. But yeah, balance, absolutely. You've got to find your own way, your own approach with it.
And you're right. Like, there's another quote from, I think it's sometimes attributed to either Theodore Roosevelt or his wife Eleanor Roosevelt, but it's do what you can with what you have where you are. And I always think that, when I'm feeling overwhelmed at like the system, or this feels too big to kind of, change overnight or by myself, then I just often bring it back to like the kids in front of me in the classroom
Yeah.
and just focusing on that, because I think you cite throughout your book the NFER research about teacher autonomy. And one of the things that they say is where teachers feel like they're most autonomous, despite having a lack of autonomy overall compared to other similar professionals, where teachers often report having the most autonomy is when they're in their classroom.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you're not being observed. Most of the time Ofsted are not there. Most of the time your SLT are not, you are the adult in charge. And I think that is where I think we need to keep bringing it back to, is like, what influence can I have, an impact can I have
Yeah,
moving
and I think I was
forwards?
talking to a teacher the other day who was saying, "Oh, I just, where do you find the energy to fight it?" And I was like, "But I don't fight the system every single day. Like I
Yeah,
couldn't do that. I would burn out. Like I probably think about it most days. I'm kind of obsessed with it. It is part of my life, but that is a choice. I don't expect anybody else to think like that. But also, you have to pass the baton on sometimes. Like there has to be, so that someone else is going to pick up that argument for a little while whilst you take a back seat and you do your day-to-day job, because actually your day-to-day job as a teacher or an educator is full on anyway. You need to know when it's time just to come back to your classroom and think about what's going on in there rather than the bigger picture, because if you don't do that then you can't continue the fight. Like you'll burn out before that's even started.
yeah. And I also find like through like Sophie and I, we've connected. I connect with other people like Ben Levinson. You've connected with Tina Farr. Like when you connect with other people that are doing things differently or trying to do things differently, you realize that it's not just you fighting it alone.
Yeah.
That you can be inspired by other people, and just there's power in numbers. Like when we're trying to change this bit by bit together. Um,
Community is so important in that. I don't think I would have, people have been so supportive of these ideas that I've been putting out there, and they're not new or revolutionary ideas. Like autonomy has been around forever, but just getting that conversation going, and people have been very much on board. And you really have to use that momentum that they create. If it was just me speaking on my own and no one responding, I would have stopped a long time ago. It really does take that group.
and Beth, you said right at the end, like your advice to ECTs is that it gets kind of easier. What is that purely down to experience, do you think? There are other things that help it get easier?
I think it's part of you just let some things go. Like I
Mm,
was saying with like making those resources, I've not cut out anything like that for a very long, long time. And that is not what is going to make a lesson great. It is, yeah, well, I think like connecting with my class, the
yeah.
relationships I build, if I have that's solid, and everything
Mm,
else just feels so much easier. But yeah, I do think as the years have gone by, it has got easier in like some aspects. But I think that
yeah.
is solely down to just letting things go and you just
Mm,
prioritizing the things that you know are going to make a real big impact.
yeah. So it's that experience of knowing what makes a difference and what doesn't, and then investing your precious time in those things that do matter.
Yeah,
Mm.
totally.
Awesome. Beth, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights.
Thank you, Beth.
We're now going to move on to our next speaker, who is Yinka Ogunnusi. She is an early childhood teacher educator. She specializes in child honoring pedagogies. So I'm really excited to hear what Yinka's got to say. She's going to be speaking about children, autonomy, and the importance of free child-led learning and play. So Yinka, welcome, and over to you.
Hi, thank you, Adrian. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to share. I get to speak for the children, so I'm happy to do that. I hope I can be heard. Am I audible?
We can hear you loud and clear,
Okay,
Yinka.
great.
Yeah, all
Okay,
good.
great. Okay. Yeah, so and thank you and well done, Sophie, for the book. I think it's timely and it's something that we need. I have tried to chip in conversations about teacher autonomy, and I honestly firmly believe that it works hand in hand with children's autonomy. So I'll start with a story. I was in a preschool classroom a few years ago, and there were a bunch of children who walked up to me. I was standing beside the tough tray, and the tough tray was set up by the practitioners in the room, and they walked up to me and asked, "What's this for? How do we play with it? What do we do with it?" And I had to look round. I am the rebel. So I looked around and I said to them, "Do whatever you want with it." But that just made me think about when we talk about children's autonomy, children's agency, children's child-led learning. What do we mean? Because um, very often we find that when I was teaching in university, and we gave assignments to students to work on, and then we say talk about child voice. And I find that they're talking about child voice from a retrospective or retroactive. It's like they're just trying to um, retrofit the idea of the child's voice. If the child was involved, they would know what the activity was about. If the child was involved, if the child's voice was involved in planning, their ideas would have been on board. It won't be the child asking, what do I do with this? So in education, we often talk about the curriculum, assessment, standards, and achievement, attainment, and whatnot. But we rarely stop to ask about humanity and say, okay, this is what we want to achieve, this is what we're doing, this is what our curriculum does. Do we ask, how does our school, how does our curriculum, how do our pedagogical methods make children fully express their humanity? Paulo Freire says that oppression begins when a group of people have other people defining what it means or what the world means to them. And children, more than anyone else, I dare say, have people tell them and speak for them and say to them what the world means, how they can live in the world, what they must do and what they mustn't do. And I advocate for educational practices that humanize children. I remember when I newly moved to England, and I worked. I had a placement in a primary school and also in a large nursery, and I know that in both settings, my mentor said to me. Um, both mentors in both settings. One was the head teacher of the school, of the primary school, and the other was the manager of the nursery. And they said to me, "You're very respectful of children." And I wondered, and how else was I meant to interact with children? it must have been very outstanding for them to note it. They don't know each other. And there's loads of practitioners in the nursery, loads of teachers in the school. You're very respectful, but I think that that's what I want to advocate for, because children have adults decide what they should learn, when they should sit, how they should feel, when they may speak, when they may use the bathroom, use the restrooms, how they should play, when they should play. But autonomy is an invitation back to their humanity. And so in this few minutes, I'm nearly wrapping up, I'll just be talking interchangeably about autonomy, agency, and child-led play. They don't mean the same thing, but then I know I'm likely preaching to the choir anyway, but I just want to bring them to the fore. And if I can, if all I can achieve is that we once again know what our why we all do what we do, why we are so passionate about children's autonomy, children's agency, then I think I'd have done a good job. So why autonomy then? Why do we advocate for autonomy? There's a practical reason, or there are practical reasons. We know that from neuroscience that children gain better executive function, they regulate their emotions better, they become more resilient, and they engage more or engage in deeper learning when they have autonomy. Autonomy is their freedom and the right to choose. And when they are in agentic schools, it's that they get the same benefits like I have enlisted amongst others. And then there's the developmental factor, where we know that play is the natural language of childhood. Children love to play. Children want to play. And so at the stage of early childhood, children want to play. So they need that autonomy, they need the agency, they need the freedom to lead their own play and their own learning. And when adults overdirect, we interrupt the process that will build their learning. And then there's the human and the ethical factor why we advocate for children's autonomy. They are people. And it's so sad that we need to say that children are people. They're not adults in training. They're not humans in training. They are people, and people should have autonomy. Howbeit, we may say that children need guidance. Yes, but they should have autonomy. We talk a lot about children's rights, and we do speak quite often about children's rights. But then I keep interrogating how much of children's rights are expressed. Not rights that we assume that they are expressing, not rights that we are benevolent in allowing them to express, but do they have the agency? Agency being autonomy is the freedom to choose, the right to choose. Agency is the capacity to act. Can children walk in and say, this is what we want, this is what we would like to see? And so that human and ethical aspect requires that we take a deeper look. So how do we promote autonomy for children? And I think it's a joyful work for adults who work with children and who support their autonomy, who promote autonomy for children. Instead of telling children what to do with materials, we offer them open time, open space, open-ended objects, uninterrupted stretches of play. I think as adults, we need to learn to step back and observe more rather than direct. Ask more questions and give fewer directions. We should take that shift from control to curiosity. And there's so much that we would find if we only took the time to be curious. What do you want to do next? What are you thinking? How can I support your plan? So that we're not managers of children and managers of their learning, but facilitators of learning. And then honoring children's decisions. If a child has chosen to take a path, honoring that decision. Uh, I, okay, I must pause here to say that, a lot of the time when we hear child-led, we people tend to think, okay, that's just letting them do whatever it is they want to do. So honoring a child's decisions is not necessarily saying, okay, so you can go ahead and do that. But then that's saying to a child, I hear you. I value what you're saying. I know that this decision might need some guidance, and walking through that decision with the child. It's not permissiveness. It's just being respectful of the child. And then when we value process over products, yes, we expect outcomes of children, but then the process to get to those outcomes should be just as valuable, if not more. And of course, slowing down. Autonomy gets suffocated by hurry. The speed with which we've got to do this and cover this learning and cover this and cover that sometimes makes us seize children's autonomy. Inadvertently, maybe we don't mean to, but then we do seize their autonomy because we have to do this. We have to move on to this next activity. We have to move on to this next topic. We're running out of time. And, we see that we then push and push and push children. And of course, when we see ourselves as partners, not the authority of meaning, we make meaning alongside children, together with children. We co-construct understandings and knowledge with children, not seeing ourselves as the authority or the carriers or the holders of meanings. Autonomy is something that we do I say that it's cultural. So just as we've spoken about teachers' autonomy and we talk about children's autonomy, it becomes a whole school culture. It becomes a whole setting culture. Our work is hard. We know that. But then we also know that our work is precious. Child-led play and autonomy, they're not, in my opinion, they are not luxuries or things that we need to work so hard to give to children. We know that the system does not want to give it to children in most cases, does not want to give it to any humans, but then it is something we need to do because they are acts of humanization. They remind us that children are not just empty vessels that we are pouring knowledge into. They're people. They're people. And so we create the conditions, we trust the child and protect their freedom to explore. And we honor the human that they already are. So I just want to leave us with a question as I end my talk. We want children's curiosity, their agency, their autonomy to grow. We want to see spaces where children are motivated, they're asking questions, they're questioning answers, they are pushing boundaries, they're pushing limits, they have provocations, they're testing ideas, because this is what we want adults to do. So we can't take it from children and expect them to naturally do these things as adults. So my question, my provocation is, what culture are you creating in your setting? Thank you.
Thank you, Yinka. That was brilliant. I've made so many notes. Um, Sorry, I'm just writing down your provocation. What culture are you? Can you remind me of your provocation?
What culture are you creating in your setting?
Okay.
So many lovely phrases, Adrian. I've written
Yeah.
down a few myself. Yeah, autonomy gets suffocated by hurry. Oh, that is just like time is so huge, isn't it?
Yeah, and I love the distinction. It's probably one of the best distinctions of autonomy and agency that I've heard actually. Autonomy is the freedom to choose, and then
Mm.
agency is the capacity to act. Because I think that gets forgotten about because if like Yinka's kind of proposing from when children are very young, early years setting and throughout their kind of childhood, if we're giving them that autonomy, we're listening to them, we're honoring their insights, their decisions, then they have all of these experiences of being given the freedom to choose and then learning how to act on that in a responsible way with obviously our guidance when they need it. But if they don't have those experiences growing up and then they're given autonomy, let's say as a teenager or as an adult, that agency bit is the missing bit. They either won't have the capacity to act or don't know how to act because they just haven't had that experience. And can I just share a quote, Yinka? Because as you were talking, it made me think of this. It's from a book called Emotional Agility by Dr. Susan David, psychologist. And she talks about raising emotionally agile children. She talks a lot about autonomy. And she says this: there's a growing cohort of kids on today's university campuses who did everything right at school. They aced their exams, they got into a fancy university, and they find the academic work a breeze, but they are completely baffled by life. And I just, that kind of quote stopped me in my tracks. And it's just kind of made me think about this talk like if we're not giving children from a young age a sense of autonomy, increasing their capacity to act with agency, they will end up like these young adults that get to uni, they've done all the right things at school, they've followed the rules, they've done the revision, but uni is an autonomous existence, right? And suddenly they're overwhelmed by that choice. Do you have any thoughts on that, Yinka? Like as people
Yes,
get older, yeah.
yes, I do. When I read about agency, and I wish I could share an article about, how agentic schools function.
Mm,
Um, Even as adults, very often it's like being in a toxic relationship, say. Um, and I don't mean that to upset anyone, but sometimes, if I was in a toxic relationship, I I have the freedom, which is the autonomy, to decide to leave or to set certain boundaries. But then I may not have the agency. It might be, I don't have where to go to. I don't have another job. So I haven't got the agency. And so this is why, from an early age, children need to know. I often ask educators, do children know their rights? We know their rights. We talk about the United Nations Convention very often, but do children know their rights and can they exercise them? And will you honor them when they're
mm,
exercised? Because from a very young age, children need to know that they have the capacity to act. When I said to those children around the tough tray, whatever you want to do with it, you can do whatever you want. That's telling them you can play with it however you
mm,
want. Just be safe, just be careful, try not to do any spills. Uh, and then I stay with them and we build on those ideas together. We develop those ideas together. I celebrate when they take certain actions, when they exercise their agency. Uh, and this has a lot to do with how you see, if I walk into a classroom, I know if there's agency because I can see how children move. I can see how they initiate conversation, and this is what we encourage children to do. This is what we encourage teachers also to do.
mm. I loved the phrase "ask more questions and give fewer directions." These are all like, I think the reason I was making so many notes and nodding was one as a teacher and just reflecting on my own teaching practice, but also as a parent. I've got a 7 and 10-year-old. Um, and yeah, it's made me reflect on just being a parent and how much autonomy and capacity to act my own children have. So yeah, it's been very insightful. Sophie, any final thoughts?
Yeah, obviously in the book there's a chapter on child autonomy, but it probably was my favorite chapter to write, and there was
Hmm.
so much more to say because, yeah, I mean, it's a whole topic by itself. We need to have teacher autonomy to be able to give children, I
Yeah.
think, because, we need to choose our timetables, the order that we do things, to get rid of things that we don't need anymore, to
Yes.
bring in new stuff. There's so much to be said about the barriers that we face in terms of encouraging child autonomy, which is why I love that quote about autonomy gets suffocated by hurry, because we are hurried all the time. We need to pack more in. But yeah, I mean, it's the reason that we want teacher autonomy is so that we can have child autonomy. Like that's
Mm.
it. It doesn't come just because I enjoy it. I mean, it's lovely because for a well-being and sense of belonging, but ultimately I want to have good well-being and a sense of belonging so I can do a good job. So it all leads that way.
Yeah. And also just um stating the obvious, but it needs to be said because it's often, I think, taken for granted or forgotten about. But children are people and people need autonomy. It just made me, right at the beginning of your book, Sophie, you talk about self-determination theory,
Hmm.
Deci and Ryan saying that
Yeah.
autonomy, relatedness, and competence are three core psychological
Yeah.
human needs. And that means
Yeah.
it's as relevant for children as it is for adults. I share self-determination theory in my talks about well-being, and I often focus on autonomy and say this is where I feel a lot of children feel let down in school.
Mm.
This is what I think is contributing to 20% of kids being persistently absent. Like, are they in control of their day-to-day lives in schools? And in many schools, the answer isn't
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Yinka, we could spend the whole evening digesting what you've said, but thank you
Mhm.
so
Okay.
much for your insights.
Thank
Um,
you.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, Yinka.
So we're now moving on
Thank you.
to a final speaker before the Q&A that follows. So our next speaker is Eliza Fricker. She is an author, she's an illustrator, she's a consultant, an expert on PDA, autism and learning, and she's the author of a Sunday Times bestselling book, which is Can't, Not, Won't, as well as other books she's contributed, which you can see behind her on her shelf. I'm jealous of those shelves. And Eliza's going to be talking about autonomy across the school community. So Eliza, welcome, and over to you.
Hi, thanks for having me. You might hear my dog snoring in the background because I took him for a walk before we came on. Also, I wanted to see if I can share my screen. It looks like I can because I've got some drawings to share with you because after all, I do draw pictures. That is my job. So let me show you these, and there we go. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me. My name is Eliza Fricker. I'm an author illustrator. I'm also known as Missing the Mark because I actually called myself this for quite a few years because I didn't want to reveal my name at the time. I think when I started illustrating my experiences of navigating the education system, I was a bit scared about what would happen, so I use this my secret name of Missing the Mark, but my cover is well and truly blown now. So mine's a sort of slightly broader aspect because, as you know, my work did begin with kind of how difficult it was as a parent to navigate the education system with a child who was finding the education system themselves very difficult. And I started in the beginning drawing myself, often looking quite wired and exhausted of trying to navigate these systems of support and all the different departments. And I didn't have anyone to kind of guide or work alongside this with. I was trying to navigate this on my own, and it was an incredibly confusing system. And all of this that I was trying to do was at the same time as having a child who was showing some very distressed behaviour as a result of the impact of that school environment. And I was really trying to find these things during this time, and I couldn't find them. Understanding, flexibility, individualized support. And at the bottom here, I've drawn a postcard saying, "Wish you weren't here," with my child at the top of a hill. So I'm kind of trying to show here what we're trying to manage as parents, as families. It's multi-layered because, like I said, we've got this child with quite high need, and we're trying to support them, but we're also trying to work out how to work this system. And I use a lot of humor. I think that sort of helps with the rage that I felt over the years with this stuff. And this was a strip that I did about imagine if we tried to run our own lives, like the divisions and the subdivisions of the support systems. And these are some of the names we had in our local authority. In fact, someone should be here today actually from my local authority, who I met up with at the weekend, funnily enough, many years later, who's one of the educational psychologists who was keen to come along. But these names were just so confusing. You've got inclusion specialist support, interaction specialist support, ASC advisory teacher. So I kind of used the humour / rage into these illustrations of my child saying, "Do you want to watch this with me?" And I'm saying, "Your ASC teacher will be able to advise you on the suitability of that." "Mum, can I have a drink?" "I'm sorry, I'm the food prep coordinator. You need the refreshment support service if you leave a message." "Mum, can you get the dog? It's being annoying." "You need to do this through the pug advisory service. We're not able to come in without going through them first." I'm being glib, obviously, but this is what we're dealing with. We are asking the school if we need to speak to these people. They are often they're sort of saying we don't need to ramp it up. They can deal with it. But actually we are trying to kind of often go round the school when things are getting very difficult and get into these systems and into our local authorities to try and get the support. And it's completely baffling. And there's all sorts of procedures and policies that we don't understand. And something I found out recently when working on a recent book with an educational psychologist was that we do have lots of law there that's kind of around the kind of SEN stuff, but local authorities all have their own policy, so they can put policy in there even though there is laws. So it really does muddy the water, and then you can give everyone really different job titles across the board that no one but them know what they do. And then we're dealing with these sort of, it's not like when you run it's not like when you run your own business, or it's not like when you have a job where you kind of schedule in meetings and you schedule in phone calls. You will be sending emails that might not be responded to. You might leave voicemails that people don't answer. And you might get phone calls when you least expect it. And this is just a comic strip I did about getting a phone call while I'm cleaning the cat litter out, and someone has phoned me that knows nothing about our situation whatsoever. I don't know why. They've probably been asked to give us a call, but out of the blue, I didn't even have a pen, and you're re-traumatizing yourself because you are reading out all your child's history again. These difficult experiences that we don't really want to be going over and over with people that we've never met. And this was actually a situation we found ourselves in with someone who came to our house. We only saw them once. I hoovered, because that's what you do. You keep hoovering so that you look like you are okay and you're maintaining some level of okayness. You keep hoovering. She came around once with a checklist. And then I never saw her again, and I never saw the paperwork. I never saw that checklist again. And then I'm sort of apologising to my child for that, because they've been asked the same generic questions again. And it's a strange sort of position you find yourself in as a parent, because on the one hand you want to protect your children from being exposed to this constantly. Why don't you like school? Do you like your pets? Those sort of questions your child gets asked over and over. And then you're you're trying to protect them, but at the same time you have to have these people into your life, and you have to be pleasant, and you have to be okay, because this relationship is not one that's on an equal footing. It's not a collaborative relationship. There is a hierarchy to this, and I speak to lots and lots of families where things that they have said, or how they have said them, have been written up quite differently from how they think they said them. One situation I had where I was broke down. I was deeply distressed in this meeting, and that got written up that I was verbally abusive. So you're very aware that there is a hierarchy, and you must behave yourself, and you must nod and smile, even though these things are not moving things forward. You're not getting anywhere nearer, and in fact a lot of these meetings do feel like a kind of fob off or a stalling tactic. And again, this is kind of me trying to sort of protect my home, if you like, from more visitors that I'm not sure what they're going to do and what they're going to offer. And I'm saying, you can't come in. I had to mop up your mess last week, and they're saying, please, I've got a ton of generic checklists and a jolly pencil, and I know someone at CAMS, because we've always got that hope maybe they're going to be that to that support. And again, I've sort of done this comparison here of, if we kind of, we're eating at a restaurant, and we had to deal with the kind of communication that we have with local authorities when we go out to eat a meal. And here I'm saying I've been waiting ages, and they're saying, well, you can email us your order and we can see if we can get you a table in a few months. And then I'm getting grumpy and saying, look, I've waited ages and the order was wrong and it was cold. And they're saying, well, you got to come and sit at a restaurant and a table, and plenty of other people don't get that. So what makes you think you're so special? And trying to ring and no one answers. So I think I'll just make my own dinner. And then I hear the doorbell go, and I'm like, yes, maybe, because you've always got that hope when that phone rings or that email comes through. And then I look in the box, and it's one slice, and it's stone cold, and it hasn't even got any cheese on it. And then I say, better than nothing, because we take what we can get. And I think what gets lost in all this is that no one kind of sees us for who we are, and we don't build those relationships up. And I think the difficulty that we have with a lot of this is that it's a system that's kind of built on a very much kind of solution or fix system. I've drawn over the years so many pictures of sort of sitting with the school Senko, being really upset, saying, we've had a really lonely half term, and then the Senko said, well, have you thought about getting a whiteboard so you can plan your half term and get yourselves out? Or have you tried a family walk? And the problem with this is that this is because they are so focused on this kind of fix. And I think when we talk about autonomy for teachers, it would be to be able to bring in some kind of holding of that space for parents in those times of difficult distress. And that would come from a kind of consistency of relationship, and one that we build up with these people, and where they are able to say, this is really, really difficult for you. I can't imagine what that's like. And I often say that when we were going through these experiences, that I didn't have anyone that ever said, there's other people going through that. There's other families like you. And the problem with when you don't say that is it creates isolation. And with that isolation, well, we know, as Bell Hooks said, no one can heal in isolation. And this is where families find themselves very alone. And it brings about shame, ultimately, when we're in that position. And so to hear some honesty is really important. And actually the person that I invited along today was one of the real deals, as I call them, someone who during that time, and whenever I speak to families, they can only name a couple on their hand, like, one or two, they'll say, who they met that were the real deal, those people that were really honest with them, and this educational psychologist said to me, I can't really see that they've done anything here particularly to help your child. Now, that's a bit, isn't it, on the one hand, but equally, it was wonderful to hear that, because when you've been struggling and second guessing yourself, because this is what happens, you start to not believe yourself through these experiences, that person brings you back to thinking, yes, you're right, that this is where we're at. And so, we do need those honest relationships. And part of that is removing that hierarchy. And interestingly enough, to kind of go, just seeing where we are in time, to go a full circle with that, is that where my child ended up after many, many years is in a learning place that kind of mirrors that. So they're in a very therapeutic setting that is very much based on kind of autonomy, and to make those children feel safe. It's a very collaborative way of learning and a very interest-based learning. So actually these things that, do go a full circle, but I can see, how much those things have worked for my child and healed them. So I don't want to say I wasn't, I was right all along, this is what we needed, but, these are the things that are very much missing, hence missing the mark. And these are the things that we need. And we all know they work. And that's the frustrating thing about it.
Thank you, Eliza.
Thank you, Eliza. One of the things I was kind of reflecting as you were speaking, I remember when I first started, when I was in my teacher training years. So I trained at London South Bank Uni. And one of the things when we're kind of being educated around supporting children with kind of SEND was this kind of mantra that typically what's good for children with SEND is good for all children. That was one of the things. So it was kind of actually making adjustments like this for not just those children, but all children will support most of your class. And when you talked about where your child has ended up, a place that's therapeutic, that's collaborative, that's autonomous, I was thinking like, every child should have that, right? That isn't.
Yeah, and I absolutely hate the terminology send. I hate this othering of it anyway, because like you said, I know this can all work. And I know I've got family who were teachers till retirement, and they've seen how it's changed. And they often have been my biggest cheerleaders in this, because they could see that too. So we know the numbers why it's so high is because we're getting more restrictive with this system. And this stuff would work for everyone. And I don't like this kind of either this add-on of support or this kind of othering of it either, because I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, and I think it links so nicely to what Yinka said, in that she said autonomy is an invitation to humanity. And actually what you were talking about there, those interactions, all you want is to be treated like a human, for there to be some level of genuine response, not this kind of scripted, this is all we offer, this is what's on the table. It's just sitting with someone, having a conversation. I'm sorry that this is all like so challenging, and that, these just being able to relate and connect on a genuine level. Like, how is that so difficult to do? But it's because of these barriers that are there, that are stopping people. That fear that you talked about is so apparent on all levels. The teachers are fearful of giving too much, because then is that not what the system wants? Or we shouldn't be seen to be, giving these parents too much, because then they'll want more, or we can't give more. And there's all these kind of little nuances that are stopping people actually connect and just put these barriers up. And we all lose out. We all lose out from that.
And language is a big part of this. Sometimes I'd receive emails, and the amount of times I've sort of shown it to friends or family and said, am I going mad? ... Can you? And they'll read it and they'll go, absolutely not. I've read, I'm quite happy to read some Russian literature or whatever, but I can't read these emails. Like, it's not even written by a human being. But is that deliberate to create that disconnect to that other human being? I don't know. Or are they just lost within this system?
I think people are scared to open up. I think because the time is so limited and resources are so limited, I think people are scared to show weakness, maybe. And also, if we give a bit, are we going to need to give more? And we can't do that. So is this, Yeah, I mean, there'll be lots of different reasons, but that's what I see a lot. It's just all fear.
Mm. And I think a big part of that fear, like, is say like with 20% of children, give or take, persistently absent from school, and there's this big drive, like we've got to get attendance up, and we're going to find parents, and now schools have this target to. And I think what's driving that is like 20% is a big chunk, 1 in 5, right? And I think if it increases above that, you get this tipping point where there's going to be more children not coming to school than are going to school, and then the whole thing unravels. And I think that's the fear, and I think this is where control comes in, and so a lack of agency and autonomy is to keep this creaking system, which is I say it's ancient. It's only a couple of 100 years old. It's not actually that old, but it really hasn't changed that much in that time. To keep this system going, we just have to keep people turning up. And I think, anyone that doesn't fit into the mold, and I'm talking also teachers, right? If you do push back too much, if you do question too much, like, you're a problem as well. And I kind of feel like, yeah, fear is behind, like, we've got to keep this creaking system just plodding along, because otherwise what's the alternative?
Well, when
And
we
like,
wrote What Can We Do When School's Not Working, a lot of professionals didn't want their name in it and were worried about talking.
right.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
a lot
fear.
of contributors in the book, there's a lot of people who won't be named in it because it's too scary to
Yeah.
do that. And I've heard of lots of different ways that SLT or, anyone working in a school will make it uncomfortable, so much so if somebody speaks up that they will have to leave or they'll be put on support plans. So that is a reality when, the fear is there and it's real. You work in some schools, they are so toxic that it will eventually push you out. And some, people need jobs. And so, I almost imagine at the moment the education system is just like this pot of boiling water, and it is trying to bubble. And what with all these policies and the curriculum and assessment review and everything, they're just holding the lid down so tight. And actually, we just need to let it bubble over, and we all need to just talk about it, and then it will just calm. But you can't just keep putting sticking plasters on, because it will get worse.
Um, I just want to say thank you for your really honest, it's very moving account of your experience as a parent. Like, it must have been, like, on a personal level exhausting for you, like trying to hold and contain that for your child, whilst also probably, writing and working yourself, like, and then managing all of that crap, basically trying to wade through these inhumane processes and language that didn't make sense. That must have been absolutely exhausting. But
And
thank you so
boring,
much.
by the way.
And boring. Well,
Really
yeah,
boring.
I can imagine soul destroying on many levels.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you, Eliza, for kind of sharing
Thank you,
that
Eliza. And
perspective.
thank you, Eliza, for the beautiful front cover.
Yes.
She did the illustration for the front cover, and just so easy to work with Eliza. She just sent over a few ideas, and I would have liked all of them. Thank you.
We're now going to move into the kind of Q&A section, and there is some questions that I'm going to go back through. Is it okay to have Yinka and Beth on the screen as well? Because it'd be good to have
Yes.
other people's perspectives on some of these questions. So let me find first one. A question for Sophie, but we can all chip in here. In your research and conversations with educators for the book, what did you find to be the single most powerful factor that could realistically restore autonomy or increase autonomy in today's policy-driven climate? What first step could schools or teachers take if they wanted to kind of nudge the dial?
I mean, the thing that I think that could shift everything is high stakes accountability. I'll come to a classroom level in a minute, but on a systemic level, the system that needs to change is Ofsted, data driven, like league tables, testing, because I think ultimately the reason that teachers are not given freedom is because people are too scared not to meet targets, not to get data, not to get numbers, to have a knock on the door from Ofsted, and things not look formal, look in control. So I think if you change that, you could shift everything.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the classroom, I think it's a really, really difficult one, because I think just linking it to another question that someone asked about what is the one thing that teachers should be able to do, because I think actually it's the same question really, is allow your teachers to teach how they see fit. Allow your teachers to teach in the order that they think is best for that cohort, and allow them to plan on a template that works for them. That's very simple. It seems crazy that I even have to say that, but if you don't have those three things, everything just is no longer organic. It's no longer genuine. It no longer connects. You don't connect to what you're teaching. You don't connect to the children. So yeah, on a classroom level, it's, allowing teachers to work things how they see fit. Trust them,
Yeah.
and trust the children.
On that point, thanks, Sophie. Yinka, in terms of trusting children, how could teachers increase the sense of autonomy children have in their classrooms? What kind of small tweaks and changes could we make?
So I would always go with observation and documenting. And these acts not done to check a box, but done because of curiosity, because we want to know. And when I say observation as well, I see that as a whole community practice. Um, I don't observe children using just my own lens, which has all my biases in it. I want to hear from the families. I want to know the communities these children have engaged with over and over again, because that then helps me to understand who they are. A lot of the deficit lens or deficit outlooks we have of children stem from our biases, stem from societal biases, societal stories told about children, and a lack of professional curiosity. And of course, to exercise our professional curiosity, we need to help parents to feel trusted and be able to trust us as educators, because there is that rift that exists
Mm-hmm.
over the years, and there's so many things that supply energy to that rift. So we need to create a culture of trust between the school and the family, between the school and the community, and then we need to adjust our lens. Once we have done that, then our observation is somewhat objective. It won't ever be 100%, but then it's somewhat objective, and we're curious, we're observing, we're keeping record. And so we can see a trajectory of the child's journey, through their voice, through the 100 languages, through the things that they have produced, through the things that they've said, through the things they have refused.
Thank you, Yinka. Just be conscious of time. I'm going to move on to a couple more questions and get other people's perspectives on this. Question from Tina Farr. Why do you think school leaders are so reluctant to give their teachers autonomy? There's nothing statutory to say they can't, so what stops them? I might come to you, Eliza, first. From your perspective of dealing with kind of schools and trying to get the support for your child, why do you think people that lead schools are so reluctant to give, it says here, teachers autonomy, but maybe parents and families as well?
I think I think it does still vary school to school, but I would say, well, something I often say to parents actually is don't look for the Ofsted outstanding schools, because they're often going to be driven by things that are probably not going to be so relevant or important, or could be quite impactful. So, if they are obsessed about the uniform, I mean, one secondary school that I looked at, they said that the schools needed to be able to raise a shine, which means those shoes needed to be polished. If there's no wiggle room on things like that, and they are, grades and uniform obsessed, then they're probably going to not be so focused on the pastoral care. And I guess that depends on who's running those schools. If it's run by people who are wanting to get those results and have the best results in the area, then they're going to have a different outlook, and often it's not the shiny schools that have the best pastoral care. It can, so we need to sort of broaden where we look and our perspective on it. And when you look at, because I've seen kind of all different types of schools now, often when you look on that kind of alternative provision page on your local authority, the first thing you'll think when you go into those schools, when you're a parent or a visitor, is you might be a bit shocked because they are not very shiny. But what you want in those schools is the heart and the ethos to be there. And something that someone said when they visited my daughter's school was, they said, I can feel that they love your child. And we don't use that word enough. And they are very different approaches, but I don't see why they can't be done in our mainstream school system. And I certainly don't think using restorative practice over behavioural leads to chaos at all. Quite the opposite. But
thank you, Eliza. On that point about kind of Ofsted grades, I think just yesterday an independent review was done into Mossbourne Community Academy in Hackney, where it kind of revealed that teachers regularly shouted at children. There was the culture of intimidation and fear. Parents kind of complained, but they were, just seen as being a nuisance. But this independent review basically backed up what parents and teachers and families, and children were saying. And that was a school that was graded outstanding in its last Ofsted, which I find baffling, because Ofsted are primarily there to safeguard children rather than judge quality of education. Sophie, why do you think school leaders, is it kind of what you were alluding to before? It's external pressures that mean school leaders are reluctant to give their teachers autonomy?
Yeah, I think it's fear. I think there are some people obviously who just make that choice and they think that's the best choice. They think that the more control they have, the better the outcomes. I do think there's many out there who really truly believe that. But I think the ones that don't believe that don't necessarily feel able to act on it down to fear. And especially with birth rates falling, there's more pressure to fill spaces, because if they don't, they lose their job. We've had so many schools close around here. So there is a real kind of, it's really high stakes at the moment. And people want to speak up, but they just can't. So I think that's why the teachers aren't given that freedom or trust.
Okay. Beth, I'm going to come to you with the next question. It's from Sally Michael. She says, what do you think is the one part of a teacher's role that should remain absolutely non-negotiably autonomous in every school, no matter the leadership style? So, someone starting out on their journey, their career in teaching, from your experience to date, what aspect of your role in the classroom do you think should be completely up to you, autonomous?
Yeah, I think it's like really, really specific, but even just the way that you kind of get your children to kind of respond to you, that kind of call and response. Sometimes that can be like so uniform, like, oh yeah, we're all gonna do that dreaded clap, and I don't want to do it now because it fills me with dread. But that having those things that you have to take ownership, and also that you choose what you want to do with your children. It's not, it can't just come from me, because I need them to do something. So it has to be something that they're going to want to do. So yeah, definitely kind of those just really small transitions throughout the day where can feel so overwhelming for the children. You are there all the time. You should be the one to work with your children to make those calls. And not every class is going to look different. So it can't be something that's going across the whole school. I think it's just tiny, very little things. Sophie obviously has talked about like the planning, and it's I was thinking earlier, really hard with everyone has that role of taking on a subject, and they want their kind of subject to do the best that they can throughout the school. But then you're the one that's teaching those subjects, but you're then having to go off someone else's planning. That's really, really hard.
Yeah.
But there's no time, is there? You can't plan all those subjects. There is no time. So that's another thing that is such a barrier to having autonomy.
I agree. Do you know, as you were speaking, Beth, I was thinking as well, like what you're talking about in terms of having autonomy about how you get your children to respond to you. Like that is you bringing your teacher identity to it, your personality, kind of what sits well with you as an individual. And like how bonkers that we don't allow in many school settings, like someone to just be themselves and
Yeah.
like to kind of see the value in the fact that a child going through, say, a primary school, even secondary school, when you have a rich diversity of teachers, teaching styles, interests, personalities, those children are getting a rich understanding of working with different adults, with different personalities, etc. And when we have this cookie cutter model of teachers all have to do this, and we have to use this script, and we have to clap like this, and children clap like that, and then that passes down, like we expect the children to fit through this very nice little round hole, or this, it comes back to Yinka's point. It dehumanizes us, I feel. Sophie, did you want to chip in?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is crazy. And I was just going to say that, inviting people to contribute to the book was just an end. Like, I had so many emails and messages of just things like that teachers wanted more control over. And that was what was shocking to me. I realized the scale of the problem quite quickly because it was things like that I was getting messages about. And I was like, how is it that we've got here where people can't make those decisions? There are some children who 30 children clapping like that, it would cause real distress. And actually, for some adults, I really don't like that huge amount of noise. So, just sharing that with my children and saying, let's come up with something that is comfortable for us all. Let's all work together and think about each other. Why is that such a problem? And why is that so difficult right now? I don't know. But maybe it is just calling it out and going, actually, should we question this? Because actually, we're very good at just going along with things because we've always done it that way. So yeah, it's crazy.
We're coming to the end, so I just wanted to thank all of our speakers. Eliza, thank you. Yinka, Beth, Sophie. I wanted to also just thank you, Sophie, for asking me to host your book launch. Feel very honoured. The book is brilliant. I've read it. I've contributed to it, as have other people on this webinar today. It is out on the 26th of Jan.
22nd of Jan.
22nd of Jan. You can pre-order it now, and Sophie's put in the link. In terms of choosing two winners for questions posted, I am going to choose, just because of time, and they were good, insightful questions. Sally Michaels, you have one assigned copy, and also Michelle Windridge. I'm not sure if she's still on the call, but we will reach out and get your details. So Sally, if you could stay behind and drop your details to Sophie for that copy. But I just wanted to personally thank you for attending. If you're catching up on the recording, then thank you for watching. Sophie, last words over to you.
I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for coming and speaking. I know how precious time is, so I really, really am so thankful, Eliza, for the book cover and for all of your support with this whole project. Adrian, you are the reason this book exists. I remember when I was sat with Michaela in a pub and she said, "Oh, our friend Adrian's written this book," and she handed it over, and I was like, and it just changed everything for me. So thank you so much. It's a real honor to have you host my book launch. It's just mad. And Yinka, incredible to connect. And honestly, your talk, I've got so many things written. So thank you for sharing. And Beth, you put up with me for the entire writing period, which how she's still friends with me, I don't know. But thank you so much. And just ask questions, everyone. Like reflect on what's going on and don't try not to be too afraid. Come together, and we've got this.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely evening, and yeah, get your copy of the book.
Thank you.